What's up, house groups? Welcome to another edition of Between Two Ferns. I'm Mike Howard, and this is my guest, Andrew Stretzenberg. Just kidding, but we are actually going to have a conversation today. On Sunday, we did Reach to One. We spread out all around the city to serve. We're smack dab in the middle of this series on the book of James, talking about how the world is watching us. Our faith is on display to a world that's full of hurting, lost, desperate people. And if you were here a couple weeks ago, you know that Andrew and Callie Stretzenberg and their family are headed to Edinburgh, Scotland to be the church and do some missionary work among the poor and the homeless and the addicted populations that are there. And so today we just want to have a conversation about missional living. Like, what does it mean and what does it look like for us as Christians to live on mission with God in our world? And like, when you hear missional living, when you talk missional living, when you talk about what it is that you guys are going to go do as missionaries in Scotland, like, what does that mean to you?
So, mission and missionality is really important in the New Testament. It's an important part of what it means to follow Jesus. Jesus himself was on mission. It says very clearly over in the Bible that God sent his son, Jesus, into the world so that he could live amongst us, that he could serve us, that he could teach us what it means to follow him, and ultimately that he could die on the cross and save us from ourselves and save us from sin. And when Jesus had died on the cross and he rose again, he said to his followers, "Go, I'm sending you into the world. Just the way that the Father sent me, I'm sending you." And we, as followers of Jesus, are not just following his moral example or his example of attending church on Sundays or whatever we think, but we actually are following him in his mission to seek and save the lost, to be amongst people who are hurting and broken, and to proclaim to them the good news. So being missional is just saying, hey, I'm going to follow Jesus into the world that is hurting and broken.
I think it's so cool because it's one of the most beautiful and profound things about the church, really. Like, sometimes we live in a world where people think the church is a place that we go on Sundays, or a church is like this thing that we do in this box that we check. But part of the beauty of the church, in my mind, is that it's a community, but it's not an insular community that's just about itself. It's not a community that's just about, doing what it wants or meeting its own needs. It's a community with a purpose. Like a purpose that extends beyond ourselves, a purpose that looks outward to a world that's hurting and a world that's in need, and a community that gathers and builds one another up and encourages one another and hopefully inspires one another to walk out and share the good news of the gospel, that Jesus came so that every person on this planet who puts their faith in him could be saved, not just from sin and death, but to the life that they're created for. And what an incredible thing. There's nothing like the church in the entire world because of that mission.
Yeah, and I think that we need to always kind of reevaluate what we mean when we talk about this thing called the church. And anyone's probably had some kind of progression of thinking about the church as going from thinking about the building to the community, and then thinking not just about that particular community, but thinking about the church as a universal entity, a group of people worldwide that have been called out to live as Christ. The metaphors that the New Testament uses are talking about the church as the bride of Christ, or the hands and feet of Jesus. And both of those are basically saying that the church is an extension, a partner, a co-laborer, a tool of Jesus in the world. And so wherever the church is where the work of Jesus is being done and being lived out on a daily basis. So we can't just think of church as something that you go to on Sunday or Wednesday or whatever it is, but church is actually something that embodies the characteristics of Jesus Christ in the world.
Which is so cool because each one of us has a role to play. I think it's easy to, just because, I don't know, I grew up thinking like this. I grew up in these, little Baptist churches, and had this idea that they're like the pastor, he has a role, and then there's like the missionaries, and we take the missionaries and we send them to Scotland. Like, oh, you're the missionary, so you're on mission, and there's this far deeper, far more beautiful picture that the Bible paints, that we are all missionaries, that there are like people who are vocationally called to do that, but their job isn't actually to do the mission. Their job is to equip the church, which is me, which is you, which is you, which is every single one of us, to go be sent. And some people are sent to India and Nepal, and some people are sent to Scotland, and some people are sent next door. Some people are sent to an office building downtown. It doesn't matter. The only functional difference in your life and my life and the lives of everyone watching is just how far God's sending us from where we are right now. But every one of us has a role to play that's critical in the body of being sent to the lives that we're crashing into, wherever we crash into them, to bring this good news that like God stepped out of eternity into history so that we could be saved, and he's at work right now to make things new and set things right. And like if that's true, that's better news than anything else the world has ever come up with.
Right. Yeah, and part of the good news of the gospel is that God not only wants to save us and redeem us for all eternity, but he also invites us to be in the process of saving other people and redeeming the world and crafting this broken world into the kingdom of God that is more in his image. And so we're all sent. We are all equipped and intended to do that work. And I think it's really important for us, especially in the 21st century, to think about church not as a place that we all gather one day out of the week, but as a group of individuals that are sent out into the world 6 days a week. And then we come back together on Sunday or whenever to worship together, to encourage each other, to study the word together, so that we can be energized to go out for another 6 days.
Yeah. That's the $64,000 theological words. That's what church means, right? Ekklesia, ekkaleo. We were called out of death, called out of brokenness, called out of the lives we were living, and sent into the missio Dei, the mission of God. Like God's action in the world has a direction, and it's the direction of the downtrodden and the lost and the broken and the hurting, and the fact that he invites us and creates space for us to partner in that is so cool. But it's a total lens change for so many people when we think about like what church is all about, and even what it means to follow Jesus. It's not just like checking the boxes or avoiding the sins. It's like actively heading out.
Yeah, and I think it's important to pause because and talk about that just a little bit as we're discussing this, because it doesn't take a huge theological education. It doesn't take a vocation to do these sorts of things. Jesus in his own ministry, one of his biggest ministries was just proximity. Jesus came. He was God incarnate, God with flesh on, living amongst his people, and he spent a lot of time with people. He listened to them. He heard them. He connected with them. He went to them, and so part of what it means to be missional is just to say, how can I be in proximity with people, and how can I share their lives? So just simple things like pausing to pay attention to people who are hurting, or pausing just to care about people's lives. We think about doing ministry, or you think about something as simple as inviting a neighbor or a friend or a coworker to church. That's a great example, but even before that, you say, why don't you just pause to say, let's go grab lunch. Let's come over for dinner. Let's meet up for coffee. Share with me about your life. Share with me what you're struggling with, because I want to care for you and your hurt and your pain in the same way that Christ cares for us in our pain. And so this idea of missional living doesn't necessarily mean you have to make these grand, dramatic, movements. It just means you have to be willing to stop and take a pause out of your busy life and say, I want to pay attention to someone else's. And I think that's the heartbeat of missional living, is just say, hey, I want to love people enough just to enter into their world just a little bit, just like Christ entered into our world.
I think we believe that's how the world's going to change. Like God is going to change people and draw people one life, 1 inch at a time. And I I think the big idea of this whole thing, the big idea of what you guys are doing in Scotland, the big idea of what we're trying to do with Reach Des Moines, the big idea in general that I pray will embrace is ultimately this. The church is not a place we go, and ministry is not something ministers do. Mm-hmm. The church is who we are, and ministry is something every single one of us are called to do every day of our lives, every time we crash into somebody who needs the love of Jesus, whether they know him already or they don't. Every life we intersect with, whether it's at work or school or in our neighborhoods, needs Jesus, and he's given us the opportunity to share his love and be his love because we are the church. And that's an awesome gift that God gives us to participate in his mission in the world.